for those people who don't know me, I'm Stephen Barnes. I've been in Hong Kong for 30 years now. I've been practicing immigration here for some 25 years. So all I know professionally is Hong Kong immigration. However, I have a tale of woe to share with you that basically gave me the foundations for the success that I've been experiencing in the last few years, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from the experience I've got to share with you. Okay, so I was a late developer. I left school when I was 15 in England, and I didn't graduate from high school. When I was 17, I put a backpack on and I went to travel the world. By the time I was 27, I was living in Hong Kong. I was married to my wife, and I was getting ready to go to law school. So I went to law school as a 27-year-old, and I graduated in 1993. So when I came straight out of law school, I thought I was Superman. And very quickly found myself in charge of a business that allowed me to gain a certain measure of success. And in those years, I think you can say that I was successful because I made two key decisions. The first decision that I made was that I was going to focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else, because I'd started off as a general legal consultant. And I realized that I was really just selling my time at a discount, a poor man's alternate to a solicitor. So I decided to put that away and focus only on Hong Kong immigration. So that allowed me to accumulate expertise over time and to tell one particular business story, that is that I was in the business of helping to solve people's immigration problems. And the second thing that I did that was very successful for me was I wrote a book on the Hong Kong immigration process, and I published it on the internet in 1996 for free. This was at the time when HSBC had mere dial-up email accounts, and we had our own server in our office, and one of my clients was an internet service provider, one of the first in Hong Kong, and they were in the floor just above me. So they ran a wire outside from their system into our system through the window, and I had my own server, and I hosted the Hong Kong Visa Handbook. And until 2000, essentially that was the making of me. However, between 2000 and 2010, it all went pear-shaped in a very big way. So really, I think a tsunami is probably the best way really to describe what happened to me. But there were three deals that I was involved in. I'd taken my early success in Hong Kong immigration and turned into quite a bit of cash. So I invested in a company called Microsulis. And then I did a deal subsequently to merge my Hong Kong immigration practice into a global practice and become a founding partner of the world's first point-to-point global immigration practice, and I'll tell you about that. And then thirdly, this other technology deal that I was invested in called Orla, which taught me one thing that was very profound that I'll share with you later on. So essentially during these 10 years I lost everything. So the first thing that I got involved in was this company called Microsulis. This was a technology that came out of a British defence contractor who were divesting themselves of all their non-core activities as a result of the Second Gulf War having delivered all the armaments that they needed to deliver to their customers. They needed to divest themselves of this technology. So this technology essentially was a revolution for women who suffer from dysfunctional uterine bleeding. And for the squirmish men amongst us, what that means is that when women menstruate each month, there is a cycle that they go through. And for some women, in fact, 20% of women between the ages of 39 and 54 suffer from dysfunctional uterine bleeding, and it's a terribly debilitating condition. And the historical solution to this particular problem was a hysterectomy, the surgical removal of the organ. And this technology that I came across and invested in was a local anesthetic office procedure as an alternate to this procedure, which was the hysterectomy, and had fantastic results. So we took this technology and we took the business and I brought it into Asia. We got it FDA approved. We were operating in Australia. We were operating systems here. And while all this was going on, we built up the valuation of the business, and we brought in $17 million US, and we got ourselves to the absolute point where we just need another $25 million to get ourselves to profitability. We were compliant all over the world, and we were on our way. And the problem for us was the date on that fundraising document was December 31, 1999. If you stretch your minds back, that was the time when the dot bomb was in full boom, and we couldn't raise any money after that. So between 1999 and 2000, beg your pardon, between 2000, the beginning of 2001, all the way down through to 2000, we were trying to maintain the value of the company by shrinking our operations, but holding on to the IP, keeping all the credentials of the procedure, both from a physiological perspective and also from the regulatory perspective. We maintained all of that value, and we were scrambling around looking to raise money just to be able to survive the next year. And lo and behold, the deal that we structured was destined to complete at the end of 2001, with a firm that was based in the World Trade Center. So when the terrorist attacks happened and the Twin Towers fell, we lost all our interest in that business. And I can tell you as an anecdote, subsequently, the intellectual property behind this business was sold for more than $1 billion to new owners in the future. So that became very expensive to me because I had almost $750,000 US in that business. So that was my microsulis experience. While all this was coming down, I still had my Hong Kong immigration practice, and in the years that I was publishing my material on the internet with the Hong Kong Visa Handbook, a group of people who had an idea for a business in the US came to see me, and they flew a kite by me that really resonated with me, and that was we should begin to build a point-to-point global immigration practice. And they had a business at that time which was a small but becoming a dominant passport and travel visa business. They had plenty of clients in the US that were asking for services beyond mere travel visas. They were asking for residence visa permissions and investment visa permissions and employment visa permissions in the countries that they were serving. So they had this idea to build this business, and I thought, well, okay, this is part of my ambition. I'll get into this deal with them. So I got into this deal with them, and essentially what happened was over time the nature of the deal changed because a third party came in, and he was an American, and he was over there with my two other American partners, and I was essentially being sort of, squeezed out of the key decisions. And one day in 2006, I was taken for what was, for all practical purposes, a walk in the woods and told to fall on my sword. So essentially what had happened as a result of all of those activities was that I handed over the keys to a business that I'd spent more than a dozen years building without properly getting compensated for it. So when that came down, for me it was a case of, well, I'm not going to just take this lightly. So I entered into litigation, and we litigated for 2.5 years until one of my ex-partners got cancer. And at that point I made the decision that I'd sort of made the point out of all of that, which was not to be rolled over. So we dropped hands, and I focused on the future. And I think he's gone on to recover from his cancer. But that was my experience with the global immigration deal. So as I say, I essentially lost everything there. Given that I'm an irrepressible serial entrepreneur, while I'm engaging in all of these businesses, I found myself with a need to have an immigration project in Australia, because I'd relocated my young family from Hong Kong to Western Australia at the end of 2000. Because of the immigration program that I'd chosen, it meant that I needed to have a business that would allow me to sustain my family's residency and ultimately citizenship in Australia. So at the end of sort of the 1990s, I'd been bewitched by this concept of 4D decision making, and I realized that email was broken when the software that Microsoft and the other email software providers gave us, it made us think in a particular way. It made us think about email as send, receive, file, and I thought, it doesn't make any sense to me, because it's what you do as a result of receiving an email that counts. So it should be a next action that the technology should be allowing you to manage, what's going to come next. So anyway, to make a long story short, I explored this idea initially as a manual configuration for Microsoft Outlook, and then I realized that you could use a macro to achieve the macro, and then from that I thought, well, hang on, there's a decent business in this. Perhaps we can develop a plugin for Outlook and then sort of reconfigure it all and make it usable for the normal human being. And so we developed that idea, and we developed that technology, and we developed all the training and an online training platform, and we built what was very, very close to a perfect business model, but for one real problem. And that is that I truly didn't understand what was going to get in the way of success with this business. I'll share that with you later. But the thing about Orla was it took $1.5 million of mine and other people's money, and what was 7 years of intellectual endeavor to become a kind of an expert in workflow and 4D organizational methodology. But just as we were turning revenues in 2008, 2009, the GFC hit. And at that point, I had no more money to sustain the business. I had to sell my family home and then scramble to try and sort of rebuild everything thereafter. So that was my $1.5 million mistake. So what are the lessons that I learned in these deals? Well, in the global immigration deal, I learned that you don't undervalue yourself and you don't allow yourself to be rolled over. I also learned in the global immigration deal is that you choose your partners very, very carefully. In my microsoulish years, I learned that loyalty is honorable, but blind loyalty is stupid. Because I had a mentor who was the guy who brought me into the deal, and he was very successful at the time that I met him, and I thought that all I needed to do to achieve my pathway to success is just to emulate him. And I realized throughout that deal there were opportunities where we could have exited that business, but he wasn't prepared to exit it because he wanted to be a billionaire, because he's never been a billionaire before. So I learned a great deal from that experience. I also learned that you should never bring your family and friends into your businesses. Don't ask them to be your investors. It's not worth it. And then the lessons I learned from Orla, and this was the key thing, even though we had the perfect solution to this particular problem, and that required only one tiny thing, and it was a tiny change in people's behavior, and they wouldn't do it. So it doesn't matter how brilliant your model is, and it doesn't matter how fanciful the whole thing is and how attractive it is, if at its core it's not going to work because of one simple flaw, then you're on a hiding to nothing if you don't know what that flaw is. So we learned that you can't expect people to change their behavior. So if your business requires your customers to change their behavior in any way, shape or form, then you're on to hiding to nothing. That's been my experience. And then finally, the lesson I learned from Orla is that you've got to stick to your knitting. After having gone through the global immigration business, seeing me looking at other jurisdictions apart from Hong Kong, and then having gone through the dysfunctional uterine bleeding business with microsoulis, and then having gone through workflow and organizational methodologies and the technology platform with Orla, what's any of that got to do with Hong Kong immigration? And I've only ever made any money out of Hong Kong immigration, so you have to stick to your knitting, and if you stick to your knitting, you become better at it than everybody else. So, those are my tale of woe, 2000, 2010. Put my family through a terrible time, all things considered, but, we came out the other end, and we're all the better for it. As Henry Ford said, failure is an opportunity to begin again, only more intelligently. So what have I learned? What have I learned now? Well, what I've learned now is that if you want to be successful, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the customer that you've got. And then you design your product around what that customer actually needs to solve their problem. If you try and foist an externality on somebody, you're on a hiding to nothing. So I've also learned that at the heart of what you do, if you want to be successful, you must be generous. You need to formulate the business model that comes out of your insights as to what the customer's all about, and understand that, you know, today when the internet is what it is and information is yearning to be free, with so many distractions, the only value, the only currency that is worth anything these days is people's attention. So, you know, if you can command people's attention, then you're on the way to having a relationship with them. So, you know, Seth Godin wrote Purple Cow, and he wrote that in 2003, I think, and the circumstances in my life at that time didn't allow me to sort of reconfigure what I was doing to take on board the notions that are enunciated in Purple Cow. But when we built the Hong Kong Visa Centre, we did it deliberately as a Purple Cow, because, you know, you have to be remarkable and you want people to talk about you. Seth Godin is just one of my 4 intellectual heroes. The other are Kevin Kelly and Don Tapscott and Charlie Munger. They've given me a breadth of thinking to appreciate that when you're perfecting that business model around the core idea of what your customer really is trying to solve, then you can put elements into the resulting business model that makes it a seamless kind of service proposition or product proposition that you offer. So to do that, you need to truly understand what it is that people are buying from you. And we learned in the immigration space that what people are really paying for is peace of mind. They're not buying a visa label in a passport. They're not buying avoidance of queues at the immigration department. So we know that we're selling peace of mind, so everything about our proposition is designed to deliver peace of mind. And if you can anticipate every sort of friction point or every job to be done in that sort of series of transactions, and then accommodate a solution that makes it absolutely on the terms of the customer, then transacting is seamless. There's no need to sell anything. It just occurs as a result of the way the business model is designed. I learned also from Seth Godin the importance of an idea virus. My idea virus is the Hong Kong Visa Geeza. And the Hong Kong Visa Geeza gives people an opportunity to remember what this proposition is that we've put out there via our websites and our service delivery model, to associate it with a couple of words that are uniquely ours. And so when people are looking for us in the future, because immigration isn't a live idea in most people's minds every day, but when they're looking for us in the future, they just search Visa Geeza and everything that you need about us is available to us. So we've interwoven an idea virus into our business model. And an irresistible offer, we give a 200% money back guarantee because we're the only people that can actually assess the risk in that relationship. So if I'm in the position to assess the risk, I should put my money where my mouth is. And that makes it, again, a part and parcel of the seamless transition to moving from being just an advisor to an actual paid professional in that relationship. So the upshot out of all these mistakes is that, you know, having been left with no capital and only the results of my education, and my education at law school taught me 2 things. It taught me how to find stuff and it taught me how to think. So the internet's got everything for you. So if you know, have got some ideas about how your products and service propositions should be configured, if you're starting from, you know, from scratch, go out on the internet, read everything that my intellectual heroes have written or have appeared in, and apply, you know, the philosophies of those sort of modern philosophies of the age, and build something new, interesting, and remarkable. So those are my takeaways. So this is the end.